Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Dr. Allen's Counseling Skills class, not so mini lecture. Today we are talking about termination of the counseling relationship. And I promise it's not as dire as it sounds. Termination is more so the term for just the end of the counseling relationship, whether it's planned or unplanned. Now, a planned termination, that's kind of best case scenario, especially one where the client decides or you together decide that the client doesn't need therapy anymore. I always tell my clients my job is to work myself out of a job. Ideally, my clients won't need me forever. And so we're actively working towards that goal in that they'll be able to sustain themselves, meet their goals, etc. We'll talk about that more in a moment, but that's best case scenario. However, there's other reasons why the counseling relationship might come to an end. It might come to an end after a predetermined number of sessions, whether the client's ready or not. Often EAPs only have about 3, 5, maybe even 12 sessions that they provide, and that is what a client is able to afford or do. Or maybe you're at a center where they only offer brief therapy. It's 6 sessions and then you're done. It's also typically how it works when you are in your internship in your master's program. You're only there for about a year. And after that, you might stay, but you more likely might be going off to another location. And so that's where you'll end those relationships with your clients. Other times that it might end might be either you or the client are moving. So telehealth has helped this in a little bit of ways where you can work with each other still. Maybe you're across the state. But once a client or you move across state lines, unless you have any sort of license portability in that state, typically you can't see them legally. Other reasons are maybe you're just taking a leave or the client is. I know myself when I had my children, I took a maternity leave. I took so many months off and let my clients know ahead of time. I made sure if they wanted to see another therapist, we got them hooked up. Others chose to just take a pause and wait to hear back from me when I returned. And some did, some didn't. It just depends on what was going on in their lives at that point. Now, other kinds of termination, and unfortunately, one of the more common ones are unplanned terminations. You don't get this beautiful termination session like I will be talking about today with all clients, but sometimes a client just stops attending, whether it's they're not ready for therapy, whether it was a bad fit and they just decide to not come anymore, or something else happens. They get busy, they have other priorities. They just either tell you or don't and stop attending their sessions. Now, say you get to work with a client for a while and you get to decide together, is it time for termination? So you want to ask, is the presenting problem under control? When they showed up here in day 1 with this is what I want to work on, this is the problem, where is that now? Has the initial level of distress been reduced? Do they have better coping skills? Can they manage the waves, right? We're not going to stop the waves of life, the challenges that life throws at them from happening. We're just not that powerful. But we can help them navigate them through these coping skills, through their relationships, and how they develop that. Does a client have a greater sense of self-awareness and better relationships? AKA, can they kind of do this on their own? Can they recognize what their challenges are, what their needs are, and communicate them to others and get them met? And is life just more enjoyable? Relationships, school, work, that tends to be a big factor. And then finally, does a client now feel capable of living without the therapeutic relationship? Okay, do they not need you anymore? This and many other reasons are when you start that conversation with a client. Ideally, you're not dropping this on them in that last session, right? You felt we're done now. But kind of a gradual, like, okay, it seems like we're really starting to get things rolling, or things are really starting to wrap up nicely. What are your thoughts about ending therapy in a few weeks or after a few sessions? Or how much longer do you think you would like to continue therapy? What works for you? Personally, I like to have it more client-led than counselor-led. And that just really comes back to throwing that back to the client. What do they need? When you're preparing for termination, it's not uncommon for a client to be upset by the end of the relationship, especially if they have previous losses in their life that make ending a relationship hard. And they might even regress in the process. in one of the last slides, it said goodbyes are hard. And I'll never forget that phrase, because one time I was seeing a kiddo and it wasn't a part of another event, but we were going to have this kind of final hurrah, right, with all the kids. And I asked, like, oh, buddy, are you coming to this party? And he goes, no. And his parents were a little confused. They're like, we're not? Like, we planned on taking you. He goes, no, goodbyes are hard. And then he just walked away. And it was just so sad, but so touching in that he valued that time together, that it was hard to say goodbye, or he kind of Michael Scotted it for those Office fans. And that's not uncommon for clients to do as well. Either they just stop coming, they see the end, they don't want to say goodbye, or they even regress in progress, and it seems like they're back at square one. And in reality, it's more of a trigger to this end of the relationship. So to kind of mitigate this, to really help prepare a client, you want to start discussing termination from the beginning if that's relevant. So if you only have 3, 6, however many sessions, you start it off like, okay, we have 6 sessions together. All right, we're down to 5. All right, we're kind of following up into our last 3 sessions. How's this going for you? What do you need in this remainder of the time? And then keep that reminder. Remind them so it's not a surprise. You get to that last session and you're like, all right, we're done today. And they feel out of sorts or surprised that this has come to an end. So now, what do you actually do in a termination session? Of course, it's up to you. It's up to the client and the flow. But the general rule is that you're not bringing up any new issues. So you want to tend to try to focus on processing the end of either this chapter or the therapeutic relationship. You might discuss the client's feelings and thoughts about the end of therapy and listen reflectively. Really just allow them to share, to process. And help them make peace with the emotions that appear. Again, it could be excitement. I met my goals. Or it could be sadness of, wow, this person who I really relied on and trusted in, we're not going to have this time together anymore. And honestly, we as counselors must accept that it's the end too. Even if our expectations aren't met. Right? If the client doesn't meet the goals of the way that we wanted. Even in an unplanned end of therapy. You might also just struggle with the fact that, this is the end of that relationship. It's not like our friendships where we can stay in touch over social media and be friends. That's not how this works. When it's the end, it's the end. We don't continue that relationship. It's not ethical. So then you might spend some time during session discussing that therapy relationship and next steps. Maybe you have an open door policy. So this is more of an end of the chapter versus the relationship, right? You're good now. And when you want to come back, if you need to come back, I'm a phone call or email away. Or maybe this is a permanent end and we do need to really process that through a little bit more. Other things you might do are focus on maintaining therapeutic gains. So the client's made all these gains in therapy. They've made this progress. How are they going to keep it up? What other supports do they have out there they can rely on? What are the barriers to those supports? What are their skills? Help them consolidate that. Maybe have that all wrapped up together in one place for them, a list or some sort of visual. And with that, visuals can be really helpful. You can, if you find yourself kind of leaning towards that expressive arts kind of therapy, you can include an intentional activity in your therapy sessions. And we'll talk about what that can look like in a second. Now, as far as maintaining therapeutic gains, I've talked about this a little bit, but the way that you do that is tenfold. You can do a lot of different things, but here's a few ideas. One is fading. So that's not just ending the relationship immediately. And instead, you might go from every week to every other week, maybe once a month, maybe once a quarter, or we'll have a check-in in 6 months, see how you're doing. And then you can also connect the client with other sources, other people, other resources available to them. So that might be paraprofessionals, think maybe like a life coach or a sponsor. You may get themselves into self-help groups. You can do self-monitoring, have a journal or some sort of chart that they keep track of how they're doing. Help them maintain their self-management skills. So have a list. What are your coping skills? How are you using them? You might role play upcoming situations to help them prepare for it and feel prepared. And then maybe have them write a letter to themselves about what they've seen and how they know when they need to come back to therapy or what they've gotten out of therapy. Again, you find and manipulate these tools into what you think will be helpful. So there are other opportunities here. You can do expressive arts therapy and take this wherever you want, right? But you could do drawing, collages, music, poems, stories. Some things that I really like doing are past, present, and future conceptualizations. So you have like a piece of paper, throw it into 3 sections. They draw or write kind of who they were, who they are now, and then who they want to be. You can kind of talk about that process and progress that they're making. You do miniature representation. So you might have some clay, sand, or have them pick a figurine that represents who they are or who they want to be. Again, whatever relates to their goals. Talk about it and they can take that with them. Sand tray projection. This is a play therapy tool where you can use essentially a sandbox with a bunch of miniatures that represent different things that the client chooses. And they can create a world in their sand that represents what they're going through or what they've overcome to get where they are. One of my favorites is more like a transition object. So one thing I like to do is to have these cards with different phrases on them. Back when I was in grad school, so not a lot of money to just go on Amazon and buy my own, I actually created these little like 2x2 inch cards off of index cards and would write different phrases or draw different things on them. And I'd have a stack, and my clients and we would go through the stack together, and they would choose a phrase that really captures our time together, and they would use that or take that with them. It'd be kind of like a parting gift. And then another activity, sentence completion. So something you can do. You might choose to self-disclose a little bit about your own feelings about termination or about the client, just to kind of help wrap up that therapeutic relationship and kind of gift that to them. So you can share like, my hope for you is, or something that I hope you will think about doing for yourself are, or some ways I think and hope you'd be different with others are, or the client fills this out on themselves. So many different ways you can use these activities. I won't go through this in detail, but I really like this article. It's available online, the CMRA model of termination. It really breaks down different things that you can do in session and what the goals are, the aims are, whether it's goal-oriented or relationship-oriented. You can shift your focus with the client to kind of really round out that process. All right, so I really tried to keep this a true mini session. So this brings us then to the end of the termination chapter and probably through your own program, or at least your own course, counseling skills course. And it's just been such a pleasure to talk with you about each of these skills hopefully each week if you've been watching. But it's just so exciting to know that you have all these skills now. You can really show them off in all of these sessions, and I hope that you do. Try when you're in session to continue to use these. Don't revert back to those old habits just because it's the last session. These are still so beneficial. And as you move forward with your counseling progress and growth, I hope that you remember these in future sessions. And whenever you just don't know what to say, these are beautiful things to lean back on. You don't have to say, use a paraphrase or reflect a feeling, and that'll get you somewhere beneficial. So congratulations on making it this far in your course, and I wish you the best of luck. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me at lkallen@seu.edu. Take care, everyone.